Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sports Entertainment Weekly, your home for last week in the world of sports. By the time this episode comes out, hopefully, we would have already sent out one other update about what went down in sports last week. This is one of our first episodes, which we call it CU specials, where we are going to just focus on one sport or even specifically just one topic in a sport and really go deep into it, share our views, um, discuss implications and speculations, etc. With that said, let's take a look at what we have in store for today. So, CU specials, UFC, WWE merger. If you are a sports entertainment fan, whether it's UFC or WWE, this is a news that could not have possibly missed. It's the biggest blockbuster merger of the year, several years in this industry. So quickly setting in the context, the biggest blockbuster merger of the year in the world of sports entertainment earlier this year, Endeavor announced that it is bringing together UFC and WWE under one brand. Um, the merger completed earlier this week, Tuesday, September 12th. So the question is, what does this historical deal mean for both the brands? So we are going to, uh, you know, take a look at that with myself, Kriska, Dave, and Khandalf sharing our respective views. Hey, Dave, that said, do
Yeah,
you want to take it forward?
yeah. This deal, which Chris has already mentioned, has got completed around September 12th, but the discussion started much earlier, around 6 months earlier. The discussion regarding the exact pricing and the other details about the deal was going on. So currently, as we know, Endeavor, the parent company of UFC, owes actually. Endeavor, the parent company of UFC, has 51% stake in TKO, the umbrella group, as Endeavor has renamed itself. And WWE stakeholders hold around 49% of all shares. Total valuation has become staggering 21 billion US dollars. The company TKO is being run by Ari Emanuel, who was running Endeavor and UFC. And it has been made very clear that Vince McMahon, despite all his past and his allegations, etc., hold a major role in the company. He has been named as executive president, if I'm not wrong. We will see the entire corporate chart in the next few
Yeah.
slides, but uh, he has a role to play. It has been made very clear, and Dana White shall run UFC and its day-to-day operations as CEO of UFC. So there have been a few title changes, few changes in roles, which we will see in the
Yes,
uh,
we will get
next
to
slide.
that right after this. Gandalf, first thoughts on the deal. This is something that has been in the works for 6 months and became official on
I,
September 12th.
I think it's brilliant. In fact, the it started with a blockbuster opening at the stock market as well. At around 100 plus dollars per share. It's a brilliant opening, and that itself shows how big this is and how much confidence the investors and the public and the
Yeah.
shareholders, all of them, have on the combined entity, right? So.
Mm,
This consolidation means a lot, not just for these two companies, but for the overall
correct.
industry as well. And it will really decide the dynamics of how it will function in the future, along with other players and competitors and others who we will get into in some time. While we get
Mm,
into that part of the discussion,
yeah,
but this is first thoughts are that this is brilliant for the industry. It's always been siloed fandoms across all these sports, but now the fan groups can also come together. and it would be enjoyable banter. It would be ticket sales. It would be everything. So
Yeah.
brilliant. But something which we need to wait and watch is how it will affect the rosters of the
Mm.
respective companies,
Yeah.
and whether there would be layoffs, which Mr. Khan has clearly
Certain,
called out. There would be
yep.
layoffs, and
Yep.
there are
Yeah.
happening as we speak at the management
Mm.
and the admin end. How it will affect the roster is something which we'll wait to see.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's still a question mark. Mm. Super. So we'll move on to what all of this means from a naming convention, the roles perspective, because uh, say whether you're a UFC fan or a WWE fan, there are a lot of new names coming into the picture. You have Endeavor, you have TKO. So we quickly put together this TKO merger guide. So what what are some of the high level implications this merger has meant for different stakeholders involved. Just a quick background into Endeavor, who's pretty much anchoring the whole deal, right? So, Endeavor Holdings is an American holding company for talent and media agencies. It was founded in 2009 after the merger of William Morris Agency and Endeavor Talent Agency. So I think it's basically two talent agencies coming together. I don't have much window into what they used to do prior to this whole UFC and WWE business. But here is where we are at. So Endeavor, which used to own UFC, went ahead and bought a majority stake in WWE. Now that UFC and WWE are coming together, uh, it had to have a different name. So it has renamed itself to TKO, right? So Ari Emanuel, who was the Endeavor of, oh, sorry, who was the CEO of Endeavor? I had an LA night, your toilet in the Korean moment there. So, who was the CEO of Endeavor? Now he becomes the CEO of TKO, basically both the groups. And Vince McMahon, as Dave, you know, accurately called out, despite everything that is going on, despite being 78 years old and in the media for all the wrong reasons, be it creative booking or some really serious allegations like sexual misconduct, continues to find himself in a position of authority where he can actually disrupt things, whether for good or bad. Vince, who used to be chairman, is now TKO's executive chairman. So I think you pointed out that he was executive president. So the
Yeah,
title is actually executive chairman. Again,
yeah,
like we don't really know what any of this means. Somebody who's watching, who's like, you know, in boardrooms meeting and stuff, who can
yeah,
actually clarify what some of these titles mean, we'd be happy to do that. Now, coming down one ring lower, where we are more familiar with some of the names, Dana White. He was the president of UFC. Now he becomes the CEO of UFC. Pretty straightforward stuff. I read up that it was basically a promotion. And for WWE, Nick Khan, who was the CEO of WWE, is now the president. So, uh, Dave and I looked it up. We can't really find anyone with the title of CEO WWE as things stand. Again, this is all based on our own research. So, yeah, maybe somebody wants to do a
And
second.
what does
Yeah,
it mean, Dave? Before you actually speak more on it, what does it mean to the overall nostalgia element? Right, it's an era coming to an end. At the end of the day, what we see is the end of the era of the McMahon family. We all
yeah,
grew up with it. We all have come so far with it.
yeah.
Be it content, be it the involvement of the McMahon family members, each of them, including Linda McMahon at some stage in the
Yeah,
90s and through the early 2000s. Everyone was so much invested both emotionally and financially into
yeah,
this business, and as fans we loved them as heels, we loved them as
mm,
faces. There were
yeah,
factions within the McMahon family, with Stone Cold and Rock put into the mix as well.
mm,
So it's all coming to an end in a way. Although it ended long
Yeah.
back, I would say. Yeah, but
Mm.
in a way, this is like the final straw that I would say. Dave,
Yeah.
any comments on that as well?
Yeah, so couple of things here. From a day-to-day perspective, I think the most important name in this chart is Paul Levesque, or Triple H as he is commonly known. And it's good to see that he has retained his position as the Chief Content Officer, which means that from a day-to-day booking perspective, I don't expect major changes. Of course, it has been happening in the past few months where Vince McMahon has been remotely suggesting changes and making additions to the show. But from a day-to-day perspective, from a booking perspective, it's very nice to see Triple H retaining his position as the chief content officer. Moving on to what Khandalf said asked about the end of an era. I think this week's Friday Night SmackDown gave us an indication as to what we can expect in terms of will there be major changes. So the nostalgia factor you talked about, Kendall, right? This week's Friday Night SmackDown was an entire nostalgia train. You had The Rock coming back. You had John Cena on the show. You had a face to face with The Rock and John Cena at one point of time in the show. So I think it was a message being sent to the fans in general that we are going to retain that part of ourselves as a company. WWE sending a message to its fans that we'll retain that part as a company, that we won't suddenly find ourselves in an octagon. We'll still find ourselves in a square circle with the same faces that fans love to see. So I think hopefully because WWE has been doing record profits throughout the last year. So hopefully there won't be any drastic changes. Hopefully I I don't want to personally as a fan, I don't want to switch on SmackDown and see wrestlers duking it out in an octagon. I want to see that sort of showmanship and that sort of theatricals which we all love in a pro wrestling ring. So yeah, I don't expect a lot of changes, but we'll in the next few months we'll clearly see what will happen.
Yeah. I think it's worth noting that this is the first time in any of our lives that WWE is not going to be solely controlled by McMahon family, as
Yeah.
Randolph brought up, right? So I see this is almost like a company that bootstrapped for several years, and now you have venture capitalists coming in. There's gonna be a lot of rigidity. There's gonna be a lot of process, things that um, Vince got away with may not be possible. Things that Vince didn't want to do will, all of a sudden, people might be open to the idea. It's little nervy, but it's nervy in a very exciting way. Yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Also,
Said hopefully the product doesn't change too much for us.
Also, I have a reverse question for Khandal here. My question will be, let's just say there's a booking decision which is being made, and there's a conflict between the chief content officer and the executive chairman of WWE, Vince McMahon. Who do you think will have the final say there? Because uh, technically, TKO executive chairman is much higher in the corporate hierarchy than a chief content officer. So, what are your thoughts on that? Who will get that final say?
I think in this case, before the merger, let's talk pre-merger. I would say that Vince always had the, ultimate authority or power. Whether it was the CEO of the WWE or chief content officer or who's Triple H and whoever it is, he always had
Me
the
too.
ultimate authority.
Literally.
Yeah, literally as the ultimate authority, as the head of the McMahon family and also as the head of the WWE. Nothing went past him. So that's the final say on that. But after the merger, being an executive chairman has its own powers from a board point of view, and he's more answerable to shareholders and others in the market hierarchy, where he would probably need to answer to the Wall Street and to the to Endeavor and folks like that, than actually taking calls on what the booking should be. So in that case, I would probably see Triple H reporting straight into Nick Khan here in this case. And Nick Khan might actually end up trusting Triple H with it, is how I'm saying it. So, because Nick Khan, let's face it, I mean, he knows the business, but he may not actually get into the everyday operations of how it's actually functioning and who's fighting who, what are the bookings looking like, what's the main event looking like, how's the feud, coming along with certain stars and things like that. Probably he would be more interested in whether the TRPs are working or not, how much revenue is being made
Yep.
across from a quarter on quarter basis. So he would be more interested in those things. And that's where I think this is an elevation in terms of responsibility for Triple H. He would be probably more free to operate than being solely answerable to Vince
Yeah,
McMahon as the head of the whole business, right?
Triple
So yeah,
has been
that
doing
that's
this
where I
for
stand.
a year. So, if I'm not mistaken, that is how the hierarchy has been for the last 1 year or so since Triple H took over as the chief content officer. I think he had been reporting to Nick Khan only. Uh, I have feeling that McMahon will not, you know, have as much sway in the day-to-day scheme of things as he did. With that said, let's move on to how some of the stakeholders are feeling about it. What are their thoughts on the merger? First up, we have comments by WWE President Nick Khan. Dave, do you want to run this down?
Yeah, so Nick Khan made a few very interesting comments, in my opinion. First one, the very important one from a live event perspective, was that from the way he envisions this partnership between UFC and WWE to go forward, is that they're going to sell premier live events of WWE and UFC as a package deal during weekends. So for example, on Saturday evenings, we will have a premier live event, say a payback, for example, and UFC's pay-per-view on Sunday night. And they will sell it as a package deal to cities as a tourist attraction. Uh, he also did mention that eventually he wants to see a major overlap between both fan bases, where UFC fans are WWE fans and WWE fans are UFC fans. Very important point which he mentioned, which will affect the talent roster, is that uh, he sees a way of WWE as a way for UFC fighters to prolong their careers. Let's just say after a number of fights, a UFC fighter is retiring. He wants to see that UFC fighter make that jump to a pro wrestling ring and remain a part of the TKO family. Is uh,
Right.
what he was very serious about.
So the second point is very interesting, where we want to get is where every UFC fan is a WWE fan and every WWE fan is a UFC fan. I think all three of us here are hardcore WWE nuts. Safe to say that. I've occasionally got a few UFC matches here and there when this guy Habib Nurmagomedov was still performing. We have a slide at the end where we really want to get into what it would take for us to actually consider watching UFC on a weekly basis or whenever that schedule is we'll get to that soon. But like Dave said, we don't want to open a Friday night SmackDown Saturday morning in India and then look at Adesanya running around in the ring, chasing Top Dollar or something. We'll see how things turn out.
I
Cool.
think the biggest change for any fan is how real or how unreal it is
Yeah.
when they switch on either of these sports or promotions. So for a WWE fan, UFC is too real, and the violence is too real, and there's
It's like
less drama.
ECW on steroids.
Yeah, it's basically, it's uh the all the promos and all the trash talk, all the stuff happens in UFC before the matches, and that too in front of a press, or in it's all widely publicized. It's almost like a boxing booking, right? So, and it's too real to be uh, you know to be it's too violent for a WWE fan, but uh, it's the other way around for UFC, right? They see this as something like a more
Kidding me.
melodramatic stuff, and so I think that's where the challenge is for a fan, and that's where for every fan it will be shocker if they actually end up watching both of them together.
All right, moving on to comments by UFC CEO Lawrence Epstein. Epstein says that he doesn't see any immediate change between the two brands and wants to have an overlap in the long run. Yeah, that makes sense. I think the last thing that they want to do is, rattle the fan bases, be it UFC or WWE. You want things to have the same look and feel that they're used to. I think we always knew that it was going to be a slow integration, so I'm not one bit surprised by Mr. Epstein's comments here. Um,
Uh,
I'll move on to the next one. Oh,
Just a
yes.
small comment
Yeah.
to make. I think the important thing which Epstein has mentioned, can we go back to the previous slide? There won't be any immediate changes simply because pro wrestling at the moment is it's the hottest it has been since the Attitude Era. Both all the companies, the two major US companies, WWE and AEW, are making records in terms of attendance and gate prices. WWE especially has broken a few records already. Like with each Premier Live event, it's doing better and better and better. Uh, AEW also filled some 80,000 people into Wembley Stadium a couple of weeks ago. So I don't think they want to mess with the atmosphere which is right now, which is very pro wrestling, so to speak, in the marketplace. So I don't think they want to, like you sir mentioned, Chris, they don't want to mess with that a lot. At least not immediately. If they see ratings go down, I think we'll see some changes. But for now, I think they will remain as it is. Yes, Khandalf, please go
So,
ahead.
Dave, is this some sort of piggybacking that UFC is doing to ride on WWE or pro wrestling for that matter? Pro wrestling's ultra popularity right now. You said specifically that it's probably the most popular since the Attitude Era days, and maybe UFC is now. It's let's agree that it's probably saturated. The fan base, it has its own fan base. It has crowds coming in as well. I'm not saying UFC is not doing well, but what I'm saying is that WWE is probably at almost trying to peak, and is the UFC trying to ride on that, and is the merger itself a strategy basically to consolidate and also try to capitalize on WWE's popularity with the fan
I
bases?
think I think your second point is perfectly correct. I think the corporate consolidation which has happened here gives more leeway for both the companies to make certain mistakes in their course of booking and their course of live events and all that. It gives them a bigger window. I won't go as far as to say that UFC is trying to ride pro wrestling's popularity coattail, so to speak, but there is certainly an element of let's let's bring both these companies together so that we have much more of a window in terms of capital and investment. We'll discuss this in further slides as well, what it means to the competitors, because I think that's a very important point to focus on.
Yeah, I want to be cautious considering we don't follow UFC. I'm not very
Yeah.
familiar with their economics and stuff. So I
Yeah,
don't
very
know how
clearly, we don't want to make any UFC
offend.
fans
Yeah,
angry. Yeah,
especially
don't
when
come and put us in a chokehold
yeah.
if you see us out on the street.
Right. Cool. This is a big one, especially from a WWE fans' perspective. And this is a headline that all of us, from Khandalf's generation to yours to mine, to possibly like my brothers who's like 10 years, younger to me. This is a headline that we all keep seeing every 2 years or so. This is a man who simply cannot, keep himself away from the spotlight. And once again, he is back. Like, this guy is literally the real life version of what we all thought Undertaker was in our screens growing up, right? There is no killing the man, the myth, the legend, Vince McMahon. Like, you can throw anything at him, he's gonna somehow like, come back stronger from it. What does
you
this
go
mean?
to his you go to his Twitter page, right? And the most liked tweet is the one where he is actually announcing his retirement. So it sort of seems like a fever dream. Like not so long ago, he publicly announced that he is done, he is retiring, this is it. We did not expect him to come back at all. Then there's this entire take boardroom takeover which happens few months into the line. Then the company gets sold. It has been from a business standpoint, while WWE is doing great, from a boardroom standpoint, it has been a very chaotic year for WWE in the last 12 to 15 months. There has been a lot of changes. There was Stephanie McMahon at one point. After Vince did his takeover, she left. So you have lot of changes, and it's very interesting to see if Vince actually retains some sort of control. There were some rumors that even this Monday he made some changes. There were rewrites happening, as is common when Vince McMahon is in charge.
Yeah, and especially considering the two talents that were in the spotlight, I would not be surprised one bit if Vince had anything to do with that. So Monday night Nia Jax and Friday night Austin Theory. Yeah,
Yeah, both getting featured spots, right? Like Nia Jax coming back, immediately attacking both Raquel Rodriguez and the women's champion Rhea Ripley. Apparently, she had been back for quite some time. They were waiting to re-debut her, so to speak, and it was one impactful debut. Let's just say re-debut. Let's just say, and yeah. So the question which will remain is, are we going to see renewed pushes for the certain favorites of Vince? Like, we know that he really likes the look and the uh, power which Nia Jax brings. There's, of course, Austin Theory, who featured in a very prominent spot against The Rock this Friday night as well. So, yeah, the question remains, which I put forward to both of you. Will we see renewed pushes for Vince's favorites on regular television going forward?
I would like to take the fifth on that one. I am not going to. I don't want to say anything that will jinx and screw up the program, which is like red hot right now.
Yeah,
WWE
and
is
having said that, Nia Jax is back, right? Saw her on SmackDown or something last week.
raw.
Raw.
Raw, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so the question remains ki, will we see any? I think we did talk about this in the previous section. If say Triple H is remaining as chief content creator and the day-to-day booker, we might not see any huge changes. Yeah, maybe there will be some renewed pushes, some rehires. As well. It seems like, for example, there have been rumors that Kairi Sane is coming back to WWE at the end of the year. So the official hiring freeze, which were the unofficial hiring freeze, which was there for the past 1 year or so, is officially over. We are seeing new talents or the old talents coming back to the WWE fold. So unless I think the major impact of Vince, which we will see, is in the big picture stuff like the bloodline storyline, for example. We might see certain aspects of the characteristic Vince McMahon things coming in. Also, there will be like certain small things you can actually recognize have been added by Vince, like for example, Dominic Mysterio being called Dirty Dom wherever possible. That's such a Vince McMahon thing. You can immediately say that he sat and he was like, no, we need to add dirty there because he's a dirty man and he is a
That's how
cheater.
I
So
like it.
we need to call him Dirty Dom everywhere possible.
And I think the biggest implication that I foresee, and based on the Rock's return and the writer's strike, Vince would be, like licking his mouth at the possibility of not just lips, his whole mouth at the possibility of a Rock versus Roman Reigns, and screwing over Cody.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned that. They actually did talk about it. I think in the Pat McAfee show, Rock did mention and talk about the fact that it was actually penciled in, but due to some issues, he could not take part in WrestleMania. But I think that's the marquee match, isn't it? Don't you agree, Thandal?
Yeah, of course.
A
I mean,
Rock
I think
versus,
absolutely,
yeah, Rock
and
versus
I think
Roman Reigns in WrestleMania.
before we bring in the next topics for discussion, I think speaking of Roman Reigns, credit to Vince McMahon for actually persisting with him for so long, and we almost to the point of failure, right? I mean, almost everyone gave up on Roman Reigns. He couldn't really speak on the mic. His matches were good, actually, pretty okay. I mean, not extraordinary, but they were good, not as bad as others who were just good on the mic. I'm not taking any names here, but I think he persisted with Roman Reigns for so long to the point of success right now that we are seeing on screen. And the bloodline storyline absolutely did good for Roman Reigns, as it has done for Usos and the whole the Samoan family. So I think great, and I think that's what Vince will be remembered for. There are certain characteristic decisions that he has made in this whole business that probably nobody else would have bet on. Yeah.
And just to add on a little bit, I'm sorry, Chris, I know we are taking a lot of time. Just to add in a little bit, I think as fans, we can need to be a little less anxious regarding Vince's comeback, even if he takes the full creative control. You can never put anything past Vince. I have just acknowledged and accepted that fact. So in future, in 4 months' time, we might just be hearing rumors that Vince is back in complete creative control. But I think as fans, we can be a little less anxious because some of the story beats we are seeing now were actually worked on by Vince. The entire Bloodline storyline was being worked on under the watchful eyes of Vince McMahon. It's obvious that Triple H made his own changes, and probably the product did better because of that. But we can be overall little less anxious from a product standpoint. I think even if Vince is fully back as the creative mastermind behind Raw and SmackDown.
Roster cut. So this is one of the less rosy parts of any merger. So you have a lot of redundancies naturally. and some people inevitably have to let go of that. So, as you can see here, Endeavor's takeover of UFC resulted in roster cuts there back in the day. And do we see big names getting cut out? Names like McIntyre, Riddle. So I think in McIntyre's case, it's a matter of his contract being up for renewal in a year or so. They chime in if I'm getting that detail wrong. And I don't think creatively, like for McIntyre, the sort of momentum he had during the pandemic, he basically carried WWE for a good year and a half before the bloodline storyline could take the weight off his shoulders. But since then, like let's not sugarcoat it, right? He has been grossly let down by WWE for reasons both outside of their control and reasons that they could have been more careful about. I think Riddle's case, he has been in the headlines consistently for all the wrong reasons, and I'm honestly surprised for everything that he brings when we watch him on the television, for all the shenanigans outside the ring. I'm shocked that he's still remained part of WWE. I want to quickly take a detour here, because since we put the episode together, where we were speculating layoffs, things have actually happened. For example, the executive vice president of global content, Jamie Horowitz, has already been let go by WWE. WWE CFO and President Frank Riddick, uh, the third, if I'm getting his name right,
Yeah.
would be leaving the company at the end of this month. And the head of marketing has been laid off, and director of enterprise, master data and governance. Some of these roles I didn't even have any clue had something to do with a product like WWE. But these are some of the big names from a corporate structure point, not the talent per se, who have already been let go, which is very unfortunate. But I don't think like at this point we are surprised. Thoughts
Uh,
on that?
Chris, I think the about 100 jobs were cut, which is very, it's sort of heartbreaking in a way, isn't it? Because after the merger, the top executives, Triple H, Vince, all of them got really big bonuses, around 5 to 10 million each. And you have right after that, around 100 jobs being cut at a corporate level, and we do not know how many jobs are going to get cut from a roster level, from a pro wrestler level, which we will see. I think some cuts are coming. Certain performers who have been on the injured list or who haven't caught fire as people would have imagined. I think they might just let a few people go like that. They might not renew Drew McIntyre, for example.
Yeah.
Riddle has had, as you mentioned, not just in WWE, has had issues with UFC as well. He is not on the best terms with Dana White. They had issues. That's why he jumped to pro wrestling. Yeah, so we'll see. So, and I think, yeah, the man in front of our screen. Hopefully, none of the jobs get cut, but some of I have a feeling that roster cuts are coming, and they will happen by the end of this year. I feel.
I
Khandalf,
think
any,
that should be
yeah,
probably at the bottom of the list in terms of how the layoffs generally work. Right now, they are focusing more on corporate layoffs and in the back end, right? From what the audiences
yeah,
could actually see, it's probably at the backstage. In the backstage, I mean, so in generally what happens in corporate layoffs or other things is uh, let's start with the merger itself. So when these companies came together, there is always a reason why they came together. It's not for entertaining the audiences or something. There's always something in it for each of these organizations. And the organization here with a majority stake, of course, will need to let certain redundant people in the other organization go or lay them off, and at the same time also retain key people. So which is why you will also need to shell out extra money to retain key people like Triple H or folks who are really required to carry on and run the business, because they might also leave fearing that they may be laid off. So the joint entity cannot let such critical people go. So you need to pay them. At the same time, you will also need to lay off maybe hundreds of redundant resources or talent, which in this case could be departments entirely. So we are speaking of probably, that's why can run into the hundreds. Why do you need two marketing departments when the two companies come together? One is in UFC, one is in WWE. So obviously you need to let the entire place go, other than probably just retain the marketing key person in WWE. So I think that's the way probably it works. So roster cuts may come later in the day, whenever they want to really focus on that. It's like basically uh, taking off the dead weight in terms of the TRPs and other things. So, and how the feuds and the storylines are coming along. So that I think it's too early to speculate, if you ask me. But of course, there are some clear names based on when contracts are expiring, and based on how much trouble they are causing this organization in terms of legal and other implications, like in Matt Riddle's case. Uh, so yeah, let's
You know,
move on.
crossovers. This is perhaps the most interesting implication of the merger. So UFC to WWE and WWE to UFC. Um, of course. So as you can see, the face of crossover. I think this is something that I personally wanted. I insisted that we have to have Conor McGregor's face for this because I think it's inevitable that he comes to WWE at some point. I've always felt that even when there was no merger on the cards, simply because he's such a sell, right? So he's cocky, he's arrogant, and he has the mic skills. And until he got his ass kicked by Habib, and then I think later it was by Poirier, he fought last year, and he like really messed up his ankle. Up until then, Connor was pretty much the face of UFC, and he is somebody who can seamlessly transition into a big time star in WWE. Um, I leave it to you guys to
I
give your
see him as loudmouth, and also with his skills, he's definitely hot to handle if he comes to the WWE. And as you said, rightly called out, Priska, he's got that game with the mic as well, so he can speak, he can do a good promotion. So yeah, let's hope that something like that happens.
I will actually disagree with both of you guys here. In terms of, as we can see, the first bullet point is which transition is easier, right? Like whether it's UFC to WWE and WWE or WWE to UFC, the first thing which comes to our mind when we hear that is that of course, it will be easier for UFC fighters to transition into WWE. We have seen certain WWE superstars trying to make that jump into UFC and not doing very well, unless you are
shut up,
Brock
Dave.
Lesnar, obviously.
You can shut
Our
up. You can stop
resident
a block listener.
except Brock Lesnar, no one has done that well. Chris knows that his favorite wrestler did not do well at all in UFC. And in case the audience is wondering who his favorite wrestler is, it's CM Punk. It's obvious. But coming back to McGregor, and I agree with both of you here. His Mike skill will put him in good stead in WWE, but I would argue that if there's a featured match right in a PLE and say McGregor is facing someone like AJ Styles, just as an example. As a pro wrestling fan, I don't want to see a 3 minute match which ends in a TKO, which ends in a knockout. If I have paid money for a pro wrestling show and uh, McGregor and AJ Styles are in a featured spot, I want to see a marathon, at least a 15 to 20-minute match, which I feel like certain UFC fighters will find it difficult to transition into because these are pro wrestling matches tend to be longer. There's psychology involved, story beats involved, callbacks involved, which and you need to have an insane level of cardio to actually pull that off. The reason AJ Styles is so good and has done it for so long is because you ask him to go 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour, he will hit all the story beats you require. He will have that psychological impact on the match. There's a clear progression of the match, which I don't think, or at least I think it will take a lot of training for someone like McGregor or someone like even Israel Adesanya to have that bit of psychology going into pro wrestling matches.
So I have a couple of thoughts on this. So I've always maintained, if you have a really good UFC fighter and you can polish his in-ring skills um, to the constraints of WWE, just stick them with Paul Heyman and he'll take care of them, right? Of course, it's not that simple, but there is something else that pretty much gets a free pass in UFC. So this is something that we touched upon in the beginning, right? The violence and the gore of UFC, and not just from a ring perspective, but even like the promos, right? So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the recent news. There is this UFC fighter Charles Radke, and he had this match with I think his name is Mike the Diamond Matthias or something, if I'm getting the name right. They had a match like pretty much around the same time this merger was announced, and Charles Radke won the match and went on to uh, pass some really offensive homophobic slurs towards the audience, right? That is something that like you can tone that down by 10, 20, 50 degrees. That's never happening in pro wrestling or in, as a matter of fact, any industry in this day and age, right? Like that was seriously disturbing what he did after the fight. And Nate Diaz, who's one of the more mainstream UFC fighters, uh, got in trouble for something similar, and he was actually suspended after a lot of backlash from the fans. But interestingly, this time out, in the post match, when Dana White, the president slash now CEO of UFC, was asked about it, his comment was sometimes wrestlers get too excited in the moment, right? So that is almost, I get excited and make bad mistakes, and that is it. So far, it's been a week, and we haven't really heard anything in terms of a fine or a suspension or even an ask for apology from this guy Charles Radke for saying something like that live and to a room full of people, right? That is something that's not gonna fly at all, as it rightly shouldn't. But UFC comes from this headspace where, like, they still think it's a gray area. They don't think it's wrong, right? They
Hmm.
still, like latch on to like things get excited. It's all emotional and stuff. I think UFC as a whole has a lot of work to do in terms of becoming PG friendly, or even have more courtesy and decency when you put out a global product, right? It's not even about the content. Like you almost feel like every talent on the roster there needs to go through a sensitivity training, right? This is something
Yeah.
that we have time and again, and when it boils over the line, it's ugly. It's really ugly. So yeah, let's see how things pan out on that front.
It's also important to mention, as you mentioned about WWE being PG. We know that WWE appeals a lot to uh, kids and all. So you don't see a lot of swearing in normal WWE production. So when a UFC fighter is making a jump into WWE, say McGregor makes a jump into WWE, uh, who is McGregor without swearing, right? We
Exactly.
know of the mic skills of McGregor because of his attitude. He swears, he talks crap, he talks shit to his opponents. But you cannot do all of the. You do not have that much of freedom in WWE, where a lot of the promos are scripted, even so. Yeah, I think the transition from UFC to WWE is much more difficult than people give it credit for.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
think
and I
in
think
a
I think
very
he
funny
might,
way.
despite the swear, cut down in swearing, even if he doesn't, even if the uh, the way the game is run in the WWE doesn't allow McGregor to do all those things, but I feel that he can carry on the attitude, uh,
Mm,
very similar to another fellow Irish wrestler, Becky Lynch. uh, you
yeah.
know she doesn't swear. She ever since she started this the man gimmick a couple of years ago, and
Yeah.
she's really ruled the mic. And I think someone similar is Conor McGregor, and he can make it work, even if he cuts down on the swearing. So that's just my take on this, guys. Yeah, let's
Interesting
move
that
on
you
to.
brought up
uh,
a fellow WWE comparison. I think, funnily, AEW right now is the middle ground between UFC and WWE. So
yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
ECW, but it's more polished, refined. And if MJF, we won't go into too much detail, but if MJF is right now the biggest name on AEW, well, I mean, after they had to, move on from Punk, and for that reason only, MJF is somebody who thrives on cheap heat, right? So he has won people over, be whether he is a baby face or a heel. He has that same loudmouth, cocky attitude that you can even see him on Twitter and everything. And he is also another name. Who is strongly touted to eventually come back to WWE. And while on paper it looks like an absolute dream match, any reservations anybody has had, it has been over his mic skills and the cheap heat he gets, right? The things that he says at AEW again doesn't fly in WWE. Like, I don't want MJF to come to WWE at the same time I want him to come. But if it comes through, if MJF can work, so can Conor McGregor. So that's how I want to end this. Um, Moving
I
on to
just love the fact that in all of this, Chris is still salty about CM Punk getting fired from AEW.
I think CM Punk in AEW and in UFC was like Andrew Flintoff in boxing. Should we say that?
Michael Jordan in baseball. That's a
Personal attacks, Chris.
quote,
Personal attacks,
quote
these
moving
are.
on
No,
to
but to be
entertainment.
honest, yeah, I'm sure you're aware of Freddie Flintoff's debut in boxing. So he did that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was going for the goat moving from one sport to another. So Jordan's transition is more ideal. Moving
Let's
on,
move on.
we are
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
discussing CM Punk's AEW and UFC stints here or anywhere for that.
maybe we'll
Who,
do a feature episode on CM Punk.
what does all of it mean for rival promotions? So, can competitors like AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, or Bellator, which thanks to Dave, we got to know that is actually poor man's UFC, compete with
I don't
TKO?
think Bellator fans are going to be very happy about that.
I don't know. Do they have any? No offense.
Ouch. Yeah, it's interesting, right, Khandalf, because as we were discussing a few minutes before we started streaming this, if there's a featured athlete, let's just say a Kenny Omega or a Will Ospreay, who are some of the premium pro wrestlers on the planet at the moment, if they become free agents, what the corporate consolidation allows WWE to do is to give them a much bigger, much more lucrative contract than any of the other competitors can. AEW cannot match on a monetary level to WWE. So I would like to get your thoughts on the fact that do you think, like, say, 5 years down the line, do you think AEW will still be in a position to compete with WWE? I know they've just put in 80,000 fans in Wembley Stadium, and they still have a lot of credit going with themselves, with the fans. But yeah, in say 5 years time period, do you see any competitors left after this merger?
Yeah, I think again, it's something which we need to probably wait and watch. Does not have immediate implications, and I think that's why this particular topic we'll keep the discussion to a minimum, because it will all be speculative at this point. But what I feel is that each of these companies offers something very very different, yet similar to both the audiences and also the roster. So from a talent point of view. Uh, People get attracted to joining each of these organizations based on their aspirations and at what stage of their career one is in. I'm trying to give a perspective of probably how it works between the talent marketplace and the employer, in this case these wrestling promotions. But I think it will probably be something which attracts someone like, AEW will probably attract someone who wants the best of both worlds, WWE and UFC, and then and no matter how much money WWE can offer, there will be obviously some trump cards and mainstays that will actually be part of AEW, and you cannot stop that. And same with WWE. People who have been loyalists in WWE have always been there, regardless of how much the rival promotions have offered. There were times when even some of very very highly competitive offers came in for some of the biggest WWE stars, and some of them never left. I'm not sure how much exactly people are offered, but the Undertaker, for example, I mean, he has been a loyalist. He has been a Vince loyalist, for example, and he has always been there. And there are Vince and WWE loyalists at this point in time in WWE, even among the new generation members. And The same is the case with AEW. They are building a core base of talent who will be loyal to that company, to to the company, and to Tony Khan, and to Chris Jericho, and everyone else who is involved in the initial days of the AEW. So I think it's all pretty early to speculate the downfall of all of these companies who are competing with TKO at the moment. But we'll just have to wait and see. So yeah, that's my take on the whole rival.
Yes. How it's ironic how Khandalf brought up Jericho's name in a conversation of loyalists for brands. Not gonna say more. I love the
I
guy.
I, I meant people loyal to Jericho. I didn't say Jericho was loyal to someone. I was very very specific to that.
Uh, yeah, but that's interesting. So, like, this is very common in football, right? There are
Yeah.
clubs like Atletico Madrid, Athletic Bilbao, like so many superstars from those clubs who could have gone on to do bigger and better things. Marco Reus, for example, is the poster boy for loyalty, who's still at Borussia Dortmund and likely retiring there. I'm sure this goes beyond, money and fame. It's a matter of where you feel at home, really. Of course, money has the biggest sway in a matter like this, but it's not everything, is probably the takeaway from this one. Cool. Closing on. We are also at 60 minutes or so. Um, we'll take turns. Dave, closing thoughts. what do you think um, will it take for you to start watching UFC?
Um, I see. It's not like I don't like watching UFC. I do watch UFC, certain big events. I like Chandler. I like Poirier. Certain fighters I do enjoy, but I don't think I don't think I'll get too much into UFC because I just enjoy the psychology of pro wrestling. I enjoy the storylines. It seems to me a bit of I won't say waste of time. It just seems to me I am not invested sometimes in UFC fights. Like it's two men who are at the peak of their physical health going at it. That is great. That's great for fans who do enjoy that, but I need something to get invested in. I want to know who I should back in such a encounter. That's why pro wrestling is just more appealing to me. I like the long form matches. I want to see an Iron Man match between AJ Styles and Finn Balor going up to having 3 or 4 falls. I want to see who Rock come back and pin Roman Reigns and win everything, all those things. So all that theatric, all that crowd involvement, I don't think UFC has all of that. So I am going to disappoint the executives of both the companies. I don't think I'll be a good crossover fan in that regard.
Cool, Khandalf.
I would largely echo Dave's comments there. To me, character building is really important, and the story around those characters is what makes the actual fight, the actual match, really interesting for me. Yeah, the hype around the whole fight, the storyline, the characters, and how I connect with those characters, and then that's what makes the whole thing interesting towards the end. More than the actual WrestleMania event, I would probably enjoy the build up to that event and how it actually culminates into that one match. I'm sorry to bring up anime here, but that's how most of these, shonen animes and all these Japanese animes which have action animes work. Like let's say Dragon Ball Z or Naruto or whoever it is. It's not the actual fight between these characters which is very interesting. It's actually how those characters are built, what you feel for those characters, what you feel against some of the villains and characters, and then how it culminates into that one final fight. So for me, that's what is important. I do watch UFC. I do follow UFC to an extent. At least the big matches, as Dave said. But then again, it's not the bashing that's really important to me. It's about the build up to the bashing. So
Right.
that's my take.
Fair enough. So I think I have a slightly counter view, much to the delight of the executives, unlike you two. Anytime that I've watched UFC, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's a old school saying, or it's almost very primal, right? There is something that gets your adrenaline going when you see two people just fight it out. And even Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg would agree with me on this one. For me, the reason why I haven't been able to take it to UFC as easily as I have with WWE is the access, right? So it's not that straightforward to watch a UFC fight as it is to watch WWE, at least where I am from. That is one. And communion. So growing up, we had people who watched the sport along. Like what makes WWE such an enticing prospect is I know after the Monday Night Raw segment, I'm gonna come back to Kandolf and Dave and at length talk about what went down. So far, I haven't found anyone to do that with UFC. So naturally, it's less exciting for me to watch something when I know there is nothing, post match waiting for me. And I think one reason where UFC actually wins is, say, if we get really busy and for example, I haven't had an opportunity to catch WWE for a couple of weeks until yesterday, and I had no idea, what Solo Sikoa was doing with John Cena. That felt so random to me. And for me to understand that, I had to go back and watch a couple of episodes. Or what is AJ Styles doing now with Bloodline? Why is Judgment Day on SmackDown? Like literally, I missed only one or at most two episodes, but none of them made sense to me. And now I, unless I get back to those episodes, I won't understand what's going on. With UFC, the very ad hoc nature of it is actually tempting, wherein I can just wake up one day and, oh, cool, these two guys are going at it. Let me watch. And there is not much context there. So the on-off nature of it is, yeah, compelling enough for me to consider watching it.
Yeah, no, I think brilliantly put there, Kriska. That's a different perspective altogether on what makes UFC exciting, and I think that also gives us a glimpse of how UFC fans are like, as you called it, that getting satisfied by the primal need of watching two people fight it out, and I think that's a brilliant point, and the ad hoc nature of it totally makes sense and helps us also to understand what the fans are like and the psychology of fans in UFC. So I think that's a brilliant take from all of these events that have transpired in the last few days or weeks. Great episode on the whole UFC WWE merger. We have a lot more sports coming in terms of discussions and parallels with cricket and football as well. And in the coming days, we will definitely be really. I'm really excited, at least from my side, to be discussing these things with you guys. So looking forward to that.
Absolutely, absolutely, Gandalf. I think this is the first CU specials episode that we have done, and I love the format where instead of having to rush through three segments of WWE or now AEW and UFC possibly, and then switch to cricket and football. I love the fact that we got to really spend time at the little details that actually makes a big difference to you loving a particular sport. So we will come back with a lot more special episodes than we originally planned across pro wrestling, football, and cricket. And so closing thoughts, not exactly thoughts. I want all three of us at the same time to go off with our favorite chant in pro wrestling to end the episode. Ready? We haven't rehearsed this. I just brought it up. That explains Gandalf and Dev's reaction. Three, two,
I'm
one.
doing LA Night.
Flash.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dev,
Oh,
I don't think we heard your chant, man.
Okay, we can do it again.
Okay. Three, two, one. Best in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
clearly it shows that we didn't rehearse it. All
Okay.
See,
right.
Khandalf and
Thank
I
you so
were
much
Yes.
always
for
going for the
tuning in.
yeah.
We'll be back with another episode of Sports Entertainment Weekly very soon. Take care
Yeah.
and have a nice week whenever you're watching this.
See you soon.
Thank you, guys. Bye.